Alex had been living in apartment 4B for exactly 93 days. He knew this because he'd been counting. Not because he was excited about anything, but because counting helped keep his mind busy. The small two-bedroom place was nothing special, but it was his escape from everything that had gone wrong in his old life. The building was old, probably built in the 1970s, with thin walls and creaky floors. Every morning at 7, he could hear Mrs. Chen from 4A making her breakfast. At 8:30, the guy from 4C would start his motorcycle, rev it 3 times, then disappear until evening. And sometime between 10 and 11 at night, he'd hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, tired footsteps that always stopped at apartment 4D. That was her apartment. The woman next door. Alex had seen her exactly 7 times since moving in. She worked strange hours, always coming home late, usually carrying a large bag and looking like she'd been through a war. Her hair was always pulled back tight and she wore the same type of clothes every day. Simple, practical, like she didn't want anyone to notice her. The first time they'd spoken was 3 weeks ago. He was struggling with his groceries, trying to balance too many bags while fishing for his keys. She'd appeared beside him like a ghost. "Here, let me help," she'd said quietly, taking 2 bags before he could protest. "Thanks. I'm Alex," he'd offered as they stood by their doors. "I'm Lily," she'd replied, then disappeared into her apartment so quickly he wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. That was their longest conversation. Since then, they'd exchanged polite nods and quiet good mornings when their paths crossed, but Alex had started noticing things about his mysterious neighbor. How she never seemed to have visitors. How her light stayed on very late, sometimes all night. How she moved through the world like she was trying not to disturb anything or anyone. It reminded him of himself, actually. After the divorce, after losing his job, after watching his entire life fall apart piece by piece, Alex had become an expert at being invisible. He'd perfected the art of existing without taking up space, of living without really being alive. His days had become a careful routine. Wake up at 7, coffee and toast, check his email for job responses that never came, walk to the corner store for necessities, come home, watch TV until his eyes got heavy, sleep, repeat. It was a safe routine, predictable. Nothing could surprise him or hurt him if he never changed the pattern. But lately, he'd found himself listening for those footsteps in the hallway, wondering what kind of job kept someone out so late. Curious about the person who seemed as determined as he was to stay hidden from the world. On this particular Thursday evening, Alex was settling into his usual spot on the couch. The news was playing, but he wasn't really watching. His dinner sat half-eaten on the coffee table, another frozen meal that tasted like cardboard but required no effort. This was his life now. Simple, quiet, empty. He'd been thinking about his ex-wife earlier, not in a sad way anymore, just remembering how she used to fill their house with noise. Music playing, friends calling, always some project or plan or excitement happening. After she left, the silence in their old house had been suffocating. That's why he'd moved here, to this small apartment where the silence felt different. Not suffocating, just present. Outside his window, the city continued its evening routine. Cars passing by, people heading home from work, the normal sounds of life happening around him. But inside apartment 4B, everything was still. Alex had gotten used to the stillness. It was safer than chaos, easier than trying to rebuild something that had already broken. He was just reaching for the remote when he heard it. A soft sound in the hallway, different from the usual footsteps. It sounded like someone was standing right outside his door, not moving. Just waiting. Alex muted the television and listened. The building was old enough that every sound traveled. But this wasn't the usual hallway noise. This was the sound of someone trying to be quiet, trying to decide something. Then came the knock, so soft he almost missed it. 3 gentle taps that seemed to ask permission rather than demand attention. Alex looked at the clock. It was barely 8:30, earlier than Lily usually came home. He wasn't expecting anyone. Actually, he couldn't remember the last time anyone had knocked on his door for any reason. He stood up slowly, suddenly aware of how quiet his apartment was, how quiet his whole life had become. Through the peephole, he could see her standing there. Lily from next door, still in what looked like work clothes, but something was different about her posture. She looked smaller somehow, like she was carrying something heavy that no one could see. When Alex opened the door, she looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold too much weight for one person. There were dark circles under them, and her hands were shaking slightly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. "Are you okay?" Alex asked quietly. She shook her head slowly, then stepped past him into his apartment without asking permission. It should have felt strange having someone enter his space so suddenly, but somehow it didn't. It felt like she belonged there, like she was supposed to be there. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, and Alex realized that whatever was about to happen would change everything about his carefully ordered, quietly empty life. Alex closed the door behind Lily, his heart beating faster than usual. She stood in the middle of his living room, looking around like she'd never seen the place before, even though it was exactly the same layout as her apartment next door. Her work bag dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have just walked in like that. I don't know what I'm doing." Alex watched her carefully. In the 3 months they'd been neighbors, he'd never seen her like this. Usually she moved through the world with purpose even when she looked tired. But right now she seemed lost, like she'd been walking in circles and couldn't find her. "Way home, it's okay," he said gently. "You said you can't do this anymore. Do what?" Lily laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes right before tears, sharp and bitter. She ran her hands through her hair, pulling it free from the tight ponytail she always wore. For the first time since he'd known her, Alex saw that her hair was longer than he'd realized, falling past her shoulders in waves. "Everything," she said, spreading her arms wide. "Work, pretending I'm fine, coming home to an empty apartment every night and acting like it doesn't bother me, smiling at people when all I want to do is scream. I can't keep pretending that I'm handling any of this." She started pacing around his small living room, her movements quick and restless. Alex had never seen anyone look so uncomfortable in their own skin. It was like watching someone try to escape from themselves. "I work at the hospital," she continued, even though Alex hadn't asked. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16. Today I watched a man die, and his family asked me if I thought he was in a better place now. What am I supposed to say to that? I don't know anything about better places. I can barely handle this place." Alex felt something twist in his chest. He recognized the tone in her voice, the way she was talking faster and faster, like she was afraid if she stopped, she might never start again. He'd felt that way after his divorce, when everyone kept asking if he was doing okay, and he'd started to wonder what okay even meant anymore. "The worst part is," Lily continued, "everyone thinks I have it all figured out. My family, my co-workers, even Mrs. Chen from next door told me last week how together I seem. If only they knew that I come home every night and sit on my kitchen floor eating cereal for dinner because I can't even manage to cook for myself anymore." She stopped pacing and looked directly at Alex for the first time since entering his apartment. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Alex could see exhaustion written in every line of her face. "Do you ever feel like you're drowning in your own life?" she asked. "Like you're going through all the motions of being a normal person, but inside you're just empty?" Alex swallowed hard. The question hit him like a punch to the stomach because, yes, he knew exactly what she meant. He'd been drowning for months, maybe even years if he was being honest. The divorce had just been the final push underwater. "Every day," he admitted quietly. Something shifted in Lily's expression when he said that. The frantic energy that had been driving her around his living room seemed to slow down. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him. "I came home tonight and stood outside my door for 20 minutes, she said, her voice softer now. "I couldn't face another evening alone with my thoughts. And then I heard your TV through the wall and I realized you were right there. Another person just existing in the same building as me. And I thought maybe Maybe if I could just talk to someone who might understand. She trailed off, looking embarrassed. This is crazy. I'm being crazy. I should go. No, Alex said quickly, surprising himself with how firm his voice sounded. You're not being crazy, and you don't have to go. Lily studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her because she nodded slowly and sank onto his couch. She curled up in the corner, pulling her knees to her chest, and suddenly she looked much younger than Alex had thought she was. I used to be different, she said quietly. I used to laugh all the time. I used to make plans and get excited about things. I used to wake up in the morning and actually want to get out of bed. When did that stop? When did I become this person who just goes through the motions? Alex sat down on the other end of the couch, careful to give her space but close enough that she'd know he was listening. Really listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. I don't think you became a different person, he said thoughtfully. I think life just got heavy, and you've been carrying it alone for too long. Lily looked at him with surprise, like she hadn't expected him to understand so completely. And in that moment, Alex realized that maybe his carefully constructed invisible life had been preparing him for this exact conversation. Maybe all those months of learning to be alone had taught him how to recognize when someone else was drowning in their own solitude. Thank you, Lily whispered. And Alex knew she wasn't just thanking him for listening. She was thanking him for not running away, for not telling her she should see a therapist or try yoga or any of the other well-meaning but useless advice people give when they don't know what else to say. Thank you for trusting me enough to knock on my door, Alex replied, and meant it completely. They sat in comfortable silence for a while after that. Alex watched as Lily's breathing slowly returned to normal, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since she'd walked through his door. Outside, the city was settling into its evening rhythm, but inside his small apartment, time seemed to move differently. Can I ask you something? Lily said eventually, her voice still quiet but steadier than before. Sure. What happened to you? I mean, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I can tell something did. You have the same look I see in the mirror every morning. Alex considered her question. He'd spent months avoiding this exact conversation with everyone in his life. His mother, his few remaining friends, even his therapist when he'd briefly tried therapy. But something about the way Lily asked, like she genuinely wanted to know, and wasn't just making conversation, made him want to answer honestly. My wife left me 8 months ago, he said simply. Well, technically we left each other. The marriage had been falling apart for years, but we kept pretending everything was fine. And then one day we both just stopped pretending. Lily nodded like she understood. Was it awful? The divorce? No, actually. It was almost a relief. The awful part was realizing that I didn't know who I was without being married. I'd been half of something for so long that I forgot how to be a whole person on my own. Alex picked at a loose thread on his couch cushion, remembering those first few weeks after the papers were signed. I lost my job around the same time, budget cuts. So suddenly I had no wife, no job, no routine, no identity. I moved here because I needed to start over, but I think I got stuck somewhere between ending my old life and beginning a new one. How do you do it? Lily asked. How do you get through the days when everything feels pointless? The question caught Alex off guard because nobody had ever asked him that before. Everyone always wanted to know when he'd be back to normal, when he'd start dating again, when he'd find a new job and get his life back on track. But Lily was asking about the actual mechanics of survival, the day-to-day process of existing, when existing felt impossible. Honestly, I don't know if I have been getting through them, he admitted. I think I've just been waiting for them to pass. Wake up, coffee, check email, grocery store, TV, sleep, repeat. It's not really living, but it's something. Lily pulled her knees closer to her chest. I do the same thing but with work. Get up, hospital, save people, come home, collapse, repeat. At least your routine is quiet. Mine is full of other people's emergencies and I have to pretend I have my life together enough to help them with theirs. That sounds exhausting. It is. And the worst part is, I used to love my job. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people, make a difference. But now it just feels like I'm going through the motions. Like I'm a robot programmed to do medical procedures and comfort families, but I can't remember why I cared about any of it in the first place. Alex understood that feeling completely. Before everything fell apart, he'd been passionate about his work in graphic design. He'd loved creating things, solving visual problems, seeing his ideas come to life. But toward the end, before the layoffs, he'd been showing up just to collect a paycheck, counting down the hours until he could go home. Maybe we both just need to figure out how to care about things again, he said. How do you do that? How do you make yourself care when everything feels gray? It was a good question, and Alex didn't have a good answer. He'd been wondering the same thing for months. I don't know yet, but maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is the first step to figuring it out. Lily smiled for the first time since she'd walked into his apartment. It was small, barely there, but it was real. You're very wise for someone who eats frozen dinners and watches the news every night. Alex laughed, surprised by the sound of his own laughter. Hey, those frozen dinners are perfectly adequate nutrition, thank you very much. Adequate nutrition, Lily repeated, shaking her head. Listen to us. We're like two people who've forgotten how to be human beings. Maybe that's why you ended up knocking on my door tonight, Alex said. Maybe we need to remind each other. They talked until almost midnight, sharing stories about their lives before everything got complicated. Lily told him about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, about her decision to move to the city for nursing school, about the boyfriend who'd gradually made her feel small and stupid until she'd stopped recognizing herself. Alex told her about his marriage, how he and his ex-wife had grown into different people without realizing it was happening, how they'd both been going through the motions for years before finally admitting they weren't happy. It's funny, Lily said as she was getting ready to leave. I was so scared to come over here tonight I thought you'd think I was crazy or tell me to get my life together or something. But talking to you feels like the first normal conversation I've had in months. Same here, Alex agreed. I'd forgotten what it felt like to talk to someone who doesn't expect me to have all the answers. At his door, Lily paused with her hand on the handle. Alex, would it be weird if I came back sometime? Not tonight, but maybe when the apartment feels too quiet? It wouldn't be weird at all, Alex said, and realized he meant it completely. My door's always open. Well, not literally always open because that would be weird. But you know what? I mean, Lily laughed, the sound lighter than anything he'd heard from her all evening. I know what you mean. Thank you for tonight, for listening, for not judging, for just being human with me. After she left, Alex stood in his living room looking around at the space that had felt like a hiding place for so long. Tonight it had felt like something else entirely. Like a place where two lost people had found each other, even if just for a few hours. For the first time in months, Alex went to bed feeling like maybe tomorrow might be different. Not perfect, not magically, fixed but different, and different felt like a good place to start. 3 weeks passed before Lily knocked on Alex's door again. This time it was on a Saturday afternoon, and she was carrying a grocery bag and wearing jeans instead of her usual work clothes. Alex had been wondering if that night had been a one-time thing, if maybe she'd decided it was too personal, too much sharing with a neighbor she barely knew. I brought ingredients, she announced when he opened the door. Real food ingredients. I figured maybe we could try cooking something that doesn't come in a cardboard box. Alex looked at the bag in her hands, then at her face. She looked different, still tired, but there was something lighter in her expression, like she'd been sleeping better or worrying less. You want to cook? Here? If that's okay. My kitchen is smaller than yours, and honestly, I haven't used my stove in about 2 months. I'm not even sure it still works. They ended up making pasta with vegetables. Nothing fancy, but it was the first time Alex had cooked a real meal since moving into the apartment. Lily turned out to be surprisingly good at chopping vegetables, her hands moving with the same steady precision he'd noticed when she was tired after work. Muscle memory from the hospital, she explained when he commented on her knife skills. You learn to work with your hands when you're dealing with medical equipment all day. As they cooked, they talked about small things. Lily mentioned that she'd started taking walks in the park near the hospital during her breaks. Alex told her he'd applied for 3 jobs that week, the first applications he'd submitted in over a month. Neither of them made a big deal out of these small changes, but Alex could feel something shifting between them. "This is nice," Lily said as they sat down to eat. "I'd forgotten what it feels like to have dinner with another person." "When was the last time you did?" Lily thought for a moment. "Christmas, I think. I went home to visit my parents, but that doesn't really count because my mom spent the whole time asking when I was going to find a nice man and settle down. This is different. This feels normal." Normal. Alex liked that word. For months, nothing in his life had felt normal. But sitting across from Lily, sharing a meal they'd made together, talking about nothing particularly important, it was the most normal he'd felt since before his marriage fell apart. After that, their routine changed without them really discussing it. Lily would stop by after work sometimes, usually carrying takeout from different places around the neighborhood. Alex would share whatever he'd discovered while job hunting, and Lily would tell him about her patients. Not the sad stories, but the funny ones, the people who made her remember why she'd wanted to become a nurse in the first place. There was this old man today, she said one evening, curled up on Alex's couch with Chinese food. 83 years old, in for a minor procedure, and he spent the whole time flirting with all the nurses. Not in a creepy way, just this sweet, old-fashioned charm. He told me I had kind eyes and that his grandson would be lucky to meet someone like me. "Did it make you think about dating?" Alex asked, then immediately felt weird for asking such a personal question. Lily considered this seriously. "Not really, but it made me think about the future in a way I haven't in a long time. Like maybe someday I'll be ready for that kind of thing again." "What about you? Do you ever think about dating?" "Sometimes. But mostly I think I need to figure out how to be happy on my own first. My therapist used to say, you can't expect another person to fix what's broken inside you." "You went to therapy?" "Briefly. Right after the divorce. It helped some, but I wasn't really ready to do the work back then. I was too angry, too focused on everything I'd lost instead of what I could build." They started doing more things together. Small things, nothing that felt like a big commitment. Alex would walk with Lily to the corner store when she needed groceries. Lily would help Alex practice interview answers when he had phone screenings for jobs. They discovered they both liked old movies, so they started having movie nights on Fridays. "This one's terrible," Lily laughed during a particularly bad 1980s action movie. "The acting is so over the top." "That's what makes it great," Alex protested. "Sometimes you need entertainment that doesn't take itself too seriously." It was during one of these movie nights that Alex realized he was laughing more. Real laughter, not the polite kind he'd been doing for months when people tried to cheer him up. Lily had a way of finding humor in things even on her bad days. She'd developed a running commentary about the people in their building that was funnier than most TV shows. "Mrs. Chen definitely has a boyfriend," she announced one evening. "She's been wearing lipstick and humming in the hallway. And I saw her buying flowers yesterday. Mrs. Chen is like 70 years old. So, love doesn't have an expiration date. Maybe she's figured something out that the rest of us haven't." Alex found himself looking forward to these conversations, to hearing Lily's observations about the world around them. She noticed things he missed, small details that made ordinary life feel more interesting. And slowly, he started noticing things too. The way the evening light came through his apartment windows differently each day. How the coffee shop owner on the corner always remembered everyone's names. Little things that made him feel more connected to the world outside his apartment. One evening, as Lily was getting ready to leave after another movie night, she paused at the door. "Alex, I want you to know that these past few weeks, talking to you, spending time together, it's helped me more than you probably realize. For the first time in months, I'm not dreading coming home after work." Alex felt something warm spread through his chest. "You've helped me too. I was getting pretty good at being invisible, but you've reminded me what it feels like to be seen." After she left that night, Alex stood in his living room and realized that his apartment didn't feel like a hiding place anymore. It felt like home. Not because the space had changed, but because he was sharing it with someone who understood what it meant to be lost and slowly finding your way back to yourself. 6 months after that first night when Lily knocked on his door, Alex got a job. Not the perfect job, not the dream position that would solve all his problems, but a good job at a small marketing firm where people seemed to actually like what they did. When he called Lily to tell her, she screamed so loud through the phone that he had to hold it away from his ear. "We're celebrating," she announced. Real celebration, not takeout on the couch celebration. They went to a restaurant that night. Nothing fancy. But it was the first time they'd been out together somewhere that wasn't the grocery store or the park. Lily wore a dress Alex had never seen before, something blue that made her eyes look brighter. She'd started wearing colors again over the past few months, gradually trading her gray and black clothes for things that seemed to match her improving mood. "I'm proud of you," she said over dinner. "Not just for getting the job, but for everything. For not giving up when things got hard. For letting me knock on your door that night. For being exactly what I needed when I needed it most." Alex felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I should be thanking you. You're the one who reminded me that I wasn't completely broken." "We reminded each other," Lily corrected. "That's what friends do." Friends. That's what they were, Alex realized. Real friends, the kind who showed up for each other without being asked, who could sit in comfortable silence or talk for hours about nothing important. It had been a long time since Alex had experienced friendship like this, uncomplicated by expectations or obligations. But sometimes, when Lily laughed at something he said, or when she fell asleep on his couch during movie nights, Alex wondered if there might be something more growing between them. Not the desperate kind of attraction that comes from loneliness, but something steadier, built on genuine understanding and shared experience. He didn't push these feelings or try to analyze them too much. For now it was enough that they had found each other, that neither of them had to face their quiet apartments alone anymore. "I talked to my mom yesterday," Lily said one evening as they were making dinner together. This had become their routine. Cooking together twice a week, taking turns choosing recipes, talking about their days while they chopped vegetables and stirred pots. "How did that go?" "Better than usual." "She asked about you, actually. I guess I mention you more than I realized." Alex looked up from the onion he was dicing. "What did you tell her?" "That I have a friend who makes me laugh and reminds me that I'm not as terrible at life as I sometimes think I am." Lily paused, then added quietly, "She said it's been a long time since I've talked about anyone that way." They looked at each other across the kitchen, and Alex felt something shift between them. Not dramatic or sudden, just a quiet recognition of what had been building between them over months of shared meals and late-night conversations. "Lily," Alex started to say, but she shook her head gently. "Not yet," she said. "We're both still figuring ourselves out. But someday, maybe." Alex nodded, understanding completely. They were both different people than they'd been 6 months ago, stronger and more whole, but still healing. Whatever this was between them, friendship, love, something in between, it needed time to grow naturally, without pressure or expectations. A year later, Alex would look back on this moment as the turning point, the night they both acknowledged that their relationship was becoming something more than mutual rescue. But that night, they simply finished making dinner and talked about Lily's new nursing supervisor and Alex's latest project at work. The changes in their lives had been gradual, but significant. Alex had not only kept his job but earned a promotion within his first 6 months. He'd started taking evening art classes, rediscovering his love for creating things. Lily had switched to day shifts at the hospital and enrolled in a program to become a nurse practitioner. "I want to work with patients who are dealing with mental health issues," she explained. "People who are struggling the way we were struggling. I think I might actually be good at helping them because I understand what it feels like to be lost." Their building had become a community for them in ways it never was before. Mrs. Chen had indeed found love, a widower from her Tai Chi class, and often invited Alex and Lily to join them for Sunday dim sum. The motorcycle guy from 4C turned out to be a paramedic who worked with Lily's hospital and they'd all started having monthly building barbecues on the roof. But the most important change was harder to define. Alex no longer felt like he was hiding from his life. His apartment was still quiet, but it was the comfortable quiet of someone at peace, not the desperate silence of someone afraid to make noise. Lily's laughter had returned, the real laughter she'd told him she'd lost, and with it came a lightness that made everyone around her smile. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Lily said something that would stay with Alex for years. "You know what I've learned? I used to think that being happy meant having everything figured out, having the perfect life with no problems. But I think real happiness is knowing that you can handle whatever comes, that you're not facing it alone." Alex looked at her, this person who had knocked on his door in her darkest moment and somehow brought light back into both their lives. "You're right. And I think the best part is, we figured that out together." Later, when people asked them how they met, they would smile and say that she knocked on his door one night when they both needed a friend. It was true, just not the whole truth. The whole truth was that two broken people had found each other and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the space between friendship and love, in the quiet moments of just being human together. 3 years later, when Alex asked Lily to marry him, she would say yes not because she needed him to complete her, but because she had learned that the best relationships are between two whole people who choose to share their wholeness with each other. But that's a different story for a different time.